We need to talk about something that's incredibly difficult, but also critically important. What happens when the legal system, the one place people are supposed to go for justice, actually becomes the source of the abuse? We're going to break down how this happens and how it can create a direct and really dangerous pathway to suicide. But look, before we dive in, I want to be really clear. This is a heavy topic. If you're struggling right now or you feel at risk of acting on suicidal thoughts, please just pause this for a moment, call or text 988 in the US to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Your safety is, without a doubt, the most important thing. So we're going to trace this whole devastating journey in 5 steps. First, we'll look at how the system itself can be turned into a weapon. Then we'll dig into how human bias just pours gasoline on that fire. After that, we'll see the toll this takes on a person's mind and body, and we'll connect that directly to real models of suicide risk. And finally, we'll tackle the biggest question. How does knowing all this help us break the cycle? All right, first step, the system as a stressor. And, we're not just talking about the normal stress of a legal case here. We're looking at how the process itself, when it's dragged out for years and years, becomes its own kind of chronic, repeating trauma. So, let's start with this key idea, paper abuse. And it is exactly what it sounds like. This isn't just legal back and forth. No, this is a deliberate strategy where legal paperwork, motions, complaints, endless filings are literally used as weapons. The whole point is to harass, to control, and to completely exhaust someone, basically using the court to continue the abuse. And this quote, wow, just let it sink in for a second. The court itself as a continuation of the abuse, not a refuge from it. Can you imagine that? The one place you're supposed to run to for safety becomes just another tool used to hurt you. It's such a profound betrayal, and it makes the system feel like an accomplice in the whole thing. And you have to understand this isn't a one-and-done kind of trauma. It's this brutal, repeating cycle. It kicks off with the shock of getting served new papers. Then you've got weeks of just agonizing stress, replaying everything in your head. Then comes the actual court date, being in the same room, hearing lies told about you. And after all that, the emotional crash. Now just imagine that cycle on repeat. For years, it is designed to grind a person into dust. But what about when the system just does nothing? When your motions for safety are ignored? When hearings are pushed back again and again? Well, that sends a really chilling message. You're invisible. Your safety doesn't matter. This isn't just frustrating, it creates this deep sense of institutional betrayal, a feeling of total defeat, and, this is key, entrapment. The feeling that there is no way out. And as we're about to see, that feeling is a core ingredient for suicide risk. Okay, let's move on to our second part and see how this gets even worse. We're shifting from the mechanics of the system now to the human side of it. How the personal biases of court professionals can create this devastating, self-fulfilling prophecy of conflict. This is where things get really twisted. On the left, you see completely normal human reactions to severe trauma. Maybe you seem emotionally numb, or maybe you show anger or cry when confronted by your abuser. But now look at the right. Look at how the system can interpret that very same behavior. Your trauma response gets relabeled as a character flaw. You're not traumatized, you're uncooperative or unstable or high conflict. It's this horrible catch-22, where the more you're suffering, the less credible you might actually seem. And this isn't just random bad luck. It's driven by well-known cognitive biases. You've got confirmation bias, where a judge gets a first impression and then only looks for evidence that proves it right. You've got status quo bias, which just means it's easier to leave a bad situation as is than to make a change. And maybe the scariest one, credibility bias, where a professional's opinion is automatically trusted over the actual lived experience of the person going through the trauma. All of this leads to this really powerful concept called court or perpetrator-induced trauma, or CPIT. This is the moment when the trauma isn't just about the abuser anymore. It's when the court itself becomes a co-perpetrator, by rewarding aggressive tactics, by punishing someone's trauma responses, and ultimately by failing to protect them. Okay, so we've seen how the system works and how bias infects it. Now let's go inward. Section 3 is all about the devastating toll this takes, both physically and mentally, on a person who's been trapped in this cycle for years on end. This kind of stress isn't just in your head. It's in your body. Your nervous system gets locked into this permanent state of high alert, that fight, flight, or freeze response. And that has very real physical results. You can't sleep, you have court-related nightmares, you get chronic headaches, stomach problems. Your body is literally keeping a running tally of every court filing and every hearing. And at this same time, that chronic stress is just waging war on your mind. It breaks down the very skills you need to fight a legal battle, your concentration, your ability to plan, your memory. And then, and this is the truly cruel part, that very difficulty in telling a clear story can be used against you in court as proof that you aren't credible. It's just a vicious, vicious cycle. This long-term siege doesn't just attack you, it attacks your support system. Friends and family get worn out. Smear campaigns can destroy professional relationships. The end result is this profound, deep feeling of isolation, a state that suicide researchers have a name for: thwarted belongingness. And then, right on top of that loneliness, comes the crushing weight of perceived burdensomeness. You watch your life savings disappear into legal fees, you see the stress you're putting on your loved ones, and you keep hearing from the court that you're the problem. You can start to truly believe that everyone you love would be better off without you. And those two feelings, being all alone and feeling like a burden, that is a profoundly dangerous combination. So let's get to our fourth section where we connect all the dots. We're now going to map these experiences that we've been talking about directly onto established scientific models of suicide risk. This isn't just a theory, it's a documented pathway. This table draws a direct, chilling line from what happens in a courtroom to the core risk factors for suicide. Let's just walk through it. That social isolation from smear campaigns we talked about, that creates what researchers call thwarted belongingness. The financial ruin, the legal fees, that builds perceived burdensomeness. Watching the system reward the person abusing you, that leads directly to hopelessness. And then this last one, the constant, repeated exposure to trauma actually increases a person's tolerance for pain, creating what's called the acquired capability for suicide. The system is, step by step, building the framework for a tragedy. The IMV model shows this as a terrifying progression. The litigation doesn't just add stress. It actively marches a person down this path. It might start with pre-existing vulnerabilities, but then the system itself manufactures these feelings of defeat and entrapment. And the final awful step is the volitional phase, where all that repeated trauma makes a person so accustomed to pain that the barrier between thinking about suicide and acting on it gets dangerously low. So after hearing all of this, you might just be feeling hopeless, but that is not the goal here. This final section is all about turning this understanding into action. It's about prevention, because if we can see how this terrible machine works, then we can start to figure out how to throw a wrench in the gears and interrupt the cycle. And this right here is the single most important takeaway from this entire explainer. The reason we break down this pathway is to validate the experiences of people who are suffering and to educate those who have the power to intervene. Understanding how this happens is the very first step to stopping it from happening. It's about interruption, not justification. Which leaves us all with this essential question. We've laid out how a system that was designed for justice can instead manufacture the conditions for suicide. So the challenge really isn't just for judges or lawyers, it's for all of us. How do we redesign this system for safety? And to anyone watching this who recognize their own story, please hear me on this. Your reactions make sense. You are not alone. And one last time, for immediate, confidential support, please call or text 988 in the US. Help is there, and you absolutely deserve to be safe.